It was the end, for whatever remains to me of life on the surface of this earth, of every vestige of mental peace and confidence in the integrity of nature and of the human mind. Nothing that I could have imagined, nothing, even that I could have gathered had I credited old Zadok's crazy tale in the most literal way, would be in any way comparable to the demoniac, blasphemous reality that I saw or believe I saw. I have tried to hint what it was in order to postpone the horror of writing it down baldly. Can it be possible that this planet has actually spawned such things, that human eyes have truly seen as objective flesh what man has hitherto known only in febrile fantasy and tenuous legend? From The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. There are things older, more vile, and less comprehensible than mortals in existence. We are relative newcomers, blessed with the ignorance of thinking we have a drop of stability and presence in a universe that contains elements so far beyond our understanding that they wouldn't even see us as they brushed our corpses aside. The Warcraft Universe is no different. Barely hidden beneath layers of the worlds are beings so powerful that they warp reality just by existing. The only difference between these creatures and the ones of Cthulhu mythos is the old gods of Warcraft are not only aggressively aware of us, but also disgusted that we would consider ourselves any more than the broken servants of their lowest denizens. Welcome to Ancient Lore, a discussion series where we peel back the layers of world building and story to examine, understand, and discuss where we came from in the World of Warcraft. Today's topic is the old gods of Azeroth. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below or connect with me on my Discord. We deviate today from standard protocol. Here, with the ancient power of the old gods before us, pretty much everything is on the table. There is no lore written or story presented on them, save for the nonsense that happened in Battle for Azeroth, that isn't something we should at least consider and possibly canonically accept. They are the most vile evil, the greatest threat to our meager and pathetic existence, and should be seen as the utmost doom of our world. Greater than the Burning Legion, so virulent that their deaths also mean the death of Azeroth, and the original rulers of the planet from before trolls even evolved. They are the Old God. Before we attempt to comprehend these ancient horrors, let's examine in a general sense what kind of beings the Old Gods are. From our understanding of the context of a few ruins, scratched writings, and a pair of Titan documents starting from Uldaman and taking us to the gates of Uldum, the Old Gods are immensely powerful and destructive beings, intrinsic infections of the planet of Azeroth itself, too powerful and embedded to be removed without obliterating the planet. While that seems like an overstatement, according to Titan lore, after the Titans realized that even the armies of their strongest servants couldn't stop Y'Shaarj, Aman'Thul reached down himself and ripped him from the surface of Azeroth, killing the Old God. The result was a near-mortal wound to the planet, magic and power oozing to the surface, which eventually resulted in the Well of Eternity. They are our doom, something even the Titans couldn't stop. Indeed, the Titans, when they came to order Azeroth, were forced to engage in a bloody and death-filled war against the agents of the Old Gods. Numerous, immense, and twisted were their servants, even the weakest of them able to obliterate a Titan construct with little stress. Only through combined arms, dedication, and immense sacrifices were the Titans and their armies able to push the Old Gods back to a point where they could be contained in some way. In the end, containment in massive Titan facilities was the only solution to doom, the only way to give the mortal races a chance against these ancient gods of twisted realities and evil intentions. Those places were Ulduar, Ahn'Qiraj, the deep catacombs under the veil of the eternal blossom, and deep beneath the waves where none could even reach. Let's be clear about this as well. While we see representations of the old gods in-game in World of Warcraft, both in Vanilla and Wrath, what we see is just limited appearances of parts of these cosmic evils. In Ankh-Raj, we're barely able to poke Cthulhu in the eye and give him a slight case of indigestion before he retreats to his plane of existence deep in the world, before he's able to obliterate us with the tiny shred of power he's able to bring into our dimension. In Wrath, we see illusions and temporal constructs used by Yogg-Saron to trick us into fighting his minions and wearing us down before the best we can do is give him a headache, take a few trinkets, and hope we can still perceive reality. We may think we're defeating these powerful raid bosses, but truth would dictate we're merely delaying the inevitable. The old gods, in no particular order, are Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, and Y'Shaarj. Let's look at each of these and discuss in detail what they represent in our mortal and insignificant context. Cthulhu is probably the old god the most people recognize, the first old god to truly show parts of its face. Rising from the ancient tomb city of Ankh-Raj, the servants of Cthulhu were, after centuries of summoning and sacrifice, able to begin to bring parts of the ancient evil back into this world. Corrupted titan constructs and the most vile of mind-bending creatures call themselves his servants, ranging from feral insectoids to towering Karaji with the will to dominate and control even the strongest mortal minds. He is the god of madness and corruption, taking great joy in toying with others and breaking anything weaker than him, including servants of other old gods. While we see him pushed back into his prison in the Temple of Ankh-Raj raid, he's merely pushed back, as we as mortals are incapable of harming an old god. He still seeks freedom, and his Karaji will work tirelessly to bring him freedom from the depths of his Titan prison once more. He isn't even the worst of them either. There is one, the god of death, that which must not be named, the fiend of 1,000 faces, Yogg-Saron, a literal death god, one who feeds off the suffering and death of mortal beings. He has been manipulating mortals into destruction and pain for as long as we have recorded history. His tentacles reach as far back, at least in our documentation, as the creation of the Dragon Soul, and he's implicated in the murder of King Lane Rin at the hands of Garona Halforken, and has a very strong connection to the Scourge. He is horror unbound and has been toying with mortals to create war and death since the dawn of time. Besides the corruption of the Titan Watchers and the manipulation of mortals, there's 4 things that stick out as the most disturbing examples of what Yogg-Saron is capable of. The first is the existence of Serenite, or as the Tusker call it, the black blood of Yogg-Saron. Many people take this name as something of a misnomer or a warning, but personally I interpret it with more literal meaning. I fully believe that Yogg-Saron, through his corrupted form that winds through all of Northrend, spreads his blood or bile or some kind of secretion that hardens and turns into the metal Serenite, which is one of the major methods he used to increase his influence. The biggest group to use Serenite, oddly enough, is the Scourge. Yogg-Saron did have a serious influence on the Scourge, confirmed by Blizzard's staff after Wrath's conclusion. Almost anything metal that the second wave of Scourge used was made of Serenite, including embedded chunks of the corrupt metal into ghouls and other undead constructs. Even the entirety of the Scourge structures in Icecrown and Icecrown Citadel itself was made of Serenite. One must ask, how much influence did the old god of death have on the Lich King, the self-styled King of the Dead? Even before Arthas merged with Ner'zhul, what corruption did Yogg-Saron have on the Lich King and the Scourge? We may never know. Something we have a great deal of documentation on that the God of Death did have a hand in was the planet-wide epidemic called the Curse of Flesh. It was Yogg-Saron that caused so many of the constructs and Titan servants to fail, devolve, and turn into some of the mortal and short-lived beings that occupy the many continents and corners of the world. This is possibly the purest expression of the sheer power Yogg-Saron has, as no other being in documented history has been able to corrupt an entire planet's worth of creatures with one sinister speaking of ancient curse. Lastly, Yogg-Saron corrupted a world tree. The Kaldorei druids, before the sundering of the world, attempted to grow another world tree up in the northern part of the continent. Its roots burrowed deep, too deep, digging into the massive prison realm of Yogg-Saron. Seeing the opportunity, the old god gripped its roots, corrupting the massive tree, and before the druids destroyed it, Yogg-Saron planted a seed in the Emerald Dream using that world tree, something that would eventually grow into the horror that was the Emerald Nightmare, slowly corrupting the green dragonflight and spreading shadow and death to many places across the globe. A single moment of lapse in judgment from the druids was enough for the god of death to guarantee the failure of an entire dimension of existence. N'Zoth, the Corruptor, Herald of Ny'alotha, is the old god we know probably the least about, but we do see much of his impact on Azeroth. While I discount anything that happened with him in battle for Azeroth as, to be completely honest, it was all horribly written, what we learn about him in Warcraft 3, World of Warcraft, Vanilla, and Cataclysm holds firm. The information available pins him as the most manipulative and cunning of the old gods, choosing to twist people's wills and desires against them for his own gain. It was the Corruptor old god that offered a bargain to Queen Azshara, giving her highborn a chance to live instead of being crushed under the ocean. Her bargain with N'Zoth twisted those magic-addicted Kaldorei into the Naga, giving them the survival they wanted at the cost of their bodies, being rebuilt in the old god's image. In addition, N'Zoth was the one who had the greatest influence on Neltharion, corrupting him with whispers of paranoia, changing him into the creature Deathwing. After Deathwing's defeat during the Second War and retreating back to Azeroth from Outland, the influence of N'Zoth created the imbalances around the world, unleashing an overpowered Deathwing and the elements themselves to create the Cataclysm. One old god remains, or at least until the Titans saw that even their greatest construct armies couldn't defeat him. Y'Shaarj was the old god of rage and despair, the Defiler, and the one who was the source of corruption of negative emotions. With the power that Y'Shaarj had at his beck and call, the only way the Titans could defeat him was their direct influence. Aman'Thul reached down to Azeroth, battling with the old god himself and ripping his mutilated corpse from the planet, nearly destroying Azeroth in the process. Through this, the Titans realized the true extent of corruption and power the old gods had over the world, and came to the conclusion the only solution was containment. Y'Shaarj's vile influence didn't end there. The evil Shah that haunted Pandaria was a direct result of the old god's death, making any manifestation of negative emotions a serious threat to anyone on the continent. In addition, the Keeper Ra was designated to clean up Y'Shaarj's corpse after Aman'Thul killed him, and locked many of the larger and more toxic parts of his corpse deep under the continent, in an immense set of ancient catacombs. Garrosh, power-hungry and polluted by his pride, took the heart of Y'Shaarj, drinking of its power, forcing the Alliance and Horde to band together before his power could grow too strong to be stopped. We should consider ourselves lucky that the old god of rage was long dead before the Orcish Horde, still demonically corrupted, first invaded Azeroth. 3 old gods remained then: Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, and N'Zoth, still in their prisons, trapped deep beneath the skin of the planet, crawling and seething, demanding to get out. If they were to get free in full, all horror would truly break loose across the planet, and there are peoples and creatures eager to crack open those cages once more. The Burning Legion may have their endless armies, but they are a swarm of furious ants compared to the full power of an unleashed old god, corruption and death incarnate. It can be difficult to bring cosmic horror into a gaming universe, but I commend the initial and some of the ongoing efforts on Blizzard's part to subtly suggest how absolutely doomed we are should the old gods break their chains entirely. While I dislike the direction that Legion and Battle for Azeroth took things, I think even the lore from Pandaria can be respected on this front. And overall, the writings for the old gods has been some of the better lore over the history of World of Warcraft's expansions. In a future episode, we'll look a bit more deeply at the cults surrounding not just the old gods, but in general, and why mortals would choose to worship things that are clearly bent on death and destruction. We'll be sure to include the Cult of the Damned in this as well, as they're integral into not just the Scourge invasion of Lordaeron, but the successful invasion of the Burning Legion to Azeroth during Warcraft 3 as well. We'll close this book of Warcraft history here and save the rest for another time. If you've enjoyed this feature, please consider subscribing here at youtube.com/theDanNation, as well as joining my Discord at tinyurl.com/DanScore. It's a Discord with 100% more Dan. A big thank you to Turtle Wow, where most of the visual footage you see during this episode was recorded at, as well as having provided the backing track for this piece. From the Lore Bunker in Boston, Massachusetts, this is Dan wishing you a wonderful and wide, wide world of lore.